Hi fight fans and welcome back to LL Sports TV. Brian Norman, WBO champion, retains his title with an absolute brutal knockout of Jin Sasaki of Japan. Possibly the knockout of the year so far. What a left hook that was. Absolutely flattens his opponent, Jin Sasaki, who I've got to say, he needs to be coached on the art of defense. Very aggressive fighter, came forward right from the start. But what he did was just play straight into Brian Norman's hands. And I've got to say, this was a very impressive performance by Brian Norman, who moves to 28-0, 22 KOs. Sensational finish. I was actually quite worried for Jin Sasaki, actually. And I've got to say, I've got to preface what I'm saying by saying, the referee and the corner of Jin Sasaki do have a lot to answer for. I mean, Jin Sasaki, all jokes aside, was stretchered from the ring. Was on the floor for several minutes, very worrying scenes. I do hope he's okay. I mean, this was the kind of fight that could take years off him. In fact, it could be the kind of fight, and I don't exaggerate, where we may have seen the last of him, or if not, you've seen the best of him already, because this was brutal. I mean, he got floored twice in the first round. He got hurt several times during the fight. And there were moments in this fight when I was saying, like, where's the ref at? I mean, why in the corner not pulling him out? Because he wasn't really competitive. He was trying. Don't get me wrong, he showed a lot of bravery and courage in there. But sometimes fighters need to be saved for themselves. And that was the case in this fight, because Brian Norman, it was just one-way traffic. I mean, I'm sure Brian Norman at times was tired of hitting Jin Sasaki. I mean, Jin Sasaki played into his hands because he came forward, no head movement, came forward in straight lines, letting his hands go. But the problem was, every time he did that, he left himself open. And Brian Norman very skillfully exploited that. So literally every time Jin Sasaki went in and threw a punch and left himself open, he got countered. And that's how he got twice in the first round with the same left hook. And that's how he got flattened in the fifth. And from rounds 1 to 5, it was just one-way traffic. And I've got to say, again, that I do think that the referee and the corner have a lot to answer for, because I do think that this fight should have been stopped before we got to the fifth round, when Brian Norman delivered that picture-perfect left hook that left Jin Sasaki sprawled out on the floor on his back, as I said, for several minutes. So that was quite a worrying thing to see. We don't like to see that. I mean, boxing is the beautiful art of brutality, as we like to opine in boxing, but I do think that Sasaki took too much punishment. And this goes to something that, you know, when a couple of weeks ago when we was reviewing the Fabio Wardley Justice Hooney fight, and some people suggesting that that fight was stopped too soon, and I was saying no. At the end of the day, I'd rather it that a fight is stopped too soon than too late, if you know what I mean. And today, I think that Sasaki was left in that ring too long. I think he should have been pulled out after about the third, certainly the fourth round. It should never have gone into the fifth round, because this man was taking an absolute shellacking in every round. There were times in this fight when Brian Norman was actually leaping off the floor and still landing flush on Sasaki. And I don't think that should happen. Sasaki's up, I think it's something like 23, 24 years old. And as I said, what we saw tonight has probably taken years off his career. But anyway, that being said, I want to give credit to Brian Norman. First thing I want to give Brian Norman credit for is that him traveling to Japan in the first place. I mean, you don't often see fighters from America go abroad, certainly to defend their titles. I would imagine he got very well remunerated for that. But to fly all the way to Japan, defend your title in another man's patch like this is not an easy thing to do. So credit to him for doing that. And of course, he was taking on a fighter that was a big puncher himself. So that in itself represents a risk. So credit to Brian Norman for that. I mean, he has been making some noise. Not too many people would have heard of him, but he is unbeaten. He has been getting a few KOs on his record recently. And certainly after this performance, his stock is going to rise, I'm sure about that. He had been calling out Jaron Boots Ennis, who's one of the other, he's the unified WBA and IBF titles. He's got 2 titles, but he's now moving up in weight to 154. He's announced that. So Brian Norman is looking for a suitable opponent. There has been talk in recent days of Brian Norman versus Devin Haney. That is an excellent fight. Based on what I'm seeing at the moment, I think I'd probably make Brian Norman a favourite for that fight now, because Devin Haney has not looked that good in his last couple of fights. We know about the fight with Ryan Garcia where he's dropped a few times. Ryan Garcia subsequently failed a drugs test, and the result of that fight was overturned from a unanimous points decision win for Ryan Garcia to a no contest. Devin Haney then fought in his next fight against Jose Ramirez. He went up to 147. Won the fight comfortably, but let's be honest, didn't look that good. Looked gun shy. Now, Devin Haney going in at 147 against Brian Norman, who's a very strong, very powerful guy, big puncher. Does Devin Haney want that work? Well, his dad Bill seems to say that yes, they do. They put out a hit list the other day in which Brian Norman was on that hit list apparently. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. And I don't think that is an easy fight at all for Devin. As I said, I think based on recent performances, you'd probably have to edge Brian Norman as a favourite. Certainly Brian Norman will go into that fight with plenty of confidence, especially off the back of what was a highlight reel win and one of his best wins. So yeah, shout out to Brian Norman. Like I said, went all the way over to Japan, defended his title, 5th round KO, brutal knockout. I recommend you watch it. But I do have some concerns for Jin Sasaki. He's a young fighter. I think he was allowed to take way too much punishment. I think the fight should have been stopped previously, but it wasn't. And yeah, let's hope he's okay. But big up to Brian Norman. Like I said, spectacular 5th round knockout, highlight reel knockout. And yeah, he moves on. As I said, hopefully a big fight coming up in the not too distant future could be against Devin Haney. But yeah, that's all from me. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for supporting the channel. Really do appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, please like, share and subscribe. And I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Take care.